After sharing my story about getting diagnosed with Hashimoto's in episode 42, and then 5 things that improved after I dropped gluten in episode 48, I've received a lot of DMs on Instagram asking how hard it is to be gluten free when I eat out, travel, spend time with friends and families during the holidays, etc. With the holidays quickly approaching, I thought I would share how I navigate being gluten free throughout the holiday season. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of 2. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Let me start by saying that I hate COVID. I hate the fact that we all had to hunker down and live with such stress and anxiety for so long. I hate that so many lives have been lost. I hate that it's not over. In fact, I'm still recovering from COVID as I record this episode. But one of the ways I support my own mental health is to look for silver linings. And for me, one of those silver linings was that my Hashimoto's diagnosis happened shortly before the pandemic lockdown. And as I made many lifestyle changes in order to improve my health, I was at home. I had no distractions on that front. It's much easier to make diet changes at home. I got to learn how to be gluten free without complicating factors like attending a party, traveling, or big holiday family gatherings where many of us would typically eat lots of goodies. As we started to venture back out into the world, I did find myself with some food anxiety. As we prepared to travel to see family for Thanksgiving, for example, I remember being anxious about what I was going to eat during our travels. What would I do if we had delays, etc. And I worried about if there would be food at my parents' house that I could eat because no one there is gluten free. These are somewhat irrational fears because you can pretty much find something that is gluten free anywhere you go. Granted, it may not be something I normally eat, but I could find something. I am not going to starve. And same thing in my parents' house. I'm going to be able to find things that I can eat. I've overcome this anxiety by always bringing several Chomps beef sticks with me in my carry on or in my suitcase. Depending on the timing of our travel, I sometimes bring something more substantial for the trip, but at a minimum, I have my Chomps. The next hurdle is staying at a house where no one else is gluten free, and they generally think you've gone a little off the reservation with this whole gluten and diet change. This is where I sometimes need to remind myself that there is always a grocery store nearby, and I can always go buy a few things for myself. Given the fact that I had a year plus to learn how to be gluten free without many distractions, and I still felt anxious about being on a dietary restriction while traveling or during the holidays, I want to acknowledge that it is a big shift. And it can feel very overwhelming to go gluten free or really dairy free. There's so many diet restrictions that many people are working with to improve their health. It can be very overwhelming to transition into sticking to that around the holidays, particularly if these holidays involve travel. So, I'm going to share how I feel about and how I personally approach being gluten free over the holidays in hopes that it can help you get mentally prepared for how you want to approach the holiday season if you're new to having dietary restrictions. So I approached being gluten free in the same way I approached sleep when we traveled when our girls were younger. When my girls were nappers and absolutely struggled if they went to bed too late, I didn't expect family members to change their plans based on my children's sleep schedules. But I also held to their schedules and missed events without feeling guilty. That is how I approach being gluten free around the holidays. I don't expect anyone to change what they would serve at Thanksgiving dinner or on or around Christmas, which is the holiday that our families celebrate. I make it my responsibility to make sure there is something that I can eat. And I don't feel guilty about not eating all the other yummy stuff that is prepared. I remember last year my mom being very worried about me not being able to eat Thanksgiving dinner because, of course, if you're not actually gluten free, it's unlikely that you're going to catch all the random places that you could find gluten. And I have a serious reaction when I eat gluten, so it's pretty important that I don't eat it. I assured her that I wanted her to forge ahead with her meals that she had planned. She's always running to the grocery store before we arrive, and she always asks what our kids need. So, in that list that I shared with her, I was sure to include some things that both the kids and I can eat. I know how to look for gluten and what ingredients to ask about, so it actually wasn't that hard for me to figure out what I could and couldn't eat at her Thanksgiving dinner table. And if I wasn't sure, I just erred on the side of not eating it. And I go into these types of family meals knowing that if there isn't much I can eat, I'm happy to make myself a simple salad and a simple protein that I always make sure I have on standby. Speaking of having food on standby, there have been several trips where we've gone to visit family and we just make sure to quickly stop at the grocery store between the airport and their house to buy a few things that I know I could quickly prepare to eat. That way, I'm not holding anything up. A little trickier situation is, say, a sit down dinner at a family friend's house. This is where you'll likely feel a bit more anxious because you are going to need to communicate in advance that you are gluten free. I think this is important because you certainly don't want your host feeling guilty if they were to serve a meal and it turns out there's very little that you can eat. But again, I am quick to offer to bring a side dish that I know I can eat or to bring a protein that I can just quickly reheat and eat while they eat everything else that the host planned to serve. And if we're going to a bigger holiday party somewhere, or this is true when we go to any parties throughout the year, I will always eat something before I go. Most often, there is something on the food table that I could confidently eat. Like, I love a good veggie tray. But I have certainly been to gatherings where there was nothing that I could eat without having to be that annoying person who asks about ingredients, which I don't want to be. I really find that if I eat before I go and I'm not starving during my time there, it's actually not that hard to just skip the food table and all the tempting items on it. And of course, I can always put a few of my Chomp's beef sticks in my purse. Are you catching on to my theme of always having my rescue beef sticks nearby? It really helps ease my anxiety, even though I very rarely have to rely on them. So, yes, being gluten free around the holidays or having any other dietary restriction, particularly if it's new, does add a little extra to the mental load. And that's annoying because we have enough on our minds during the holiday season. But I often find the hardest part is putting whoever is hosting you at ease. That's why I like to always have that little plan for myself, and I like to reassure everyone that I'm fine with them sticking to their traditional meals or whatever they had planned to serve. If this is your first holiday season being gluten-free or dealing with another dietary restriction, or you still find yourself feeling like you're missing out, I want to share one last piece of advice. If you have a favorite dish that typically has gluten or the ingredient you can no longer eat in it, I strongly encourage you to start experimenting with making an option without gluten or without said ingredient that you'll enjoy. There are so many gluten-free resources out there. There are resources for all sorts of dietary restrictions. Pinterest is a great place to look for gluten-free recipes or whatever restriction you have. For me, gravy falls into this category because I always love having gravy around the holidays. And we have definitely made some delicious gluten-free gravy during the past few years. I also like to make gluten-free cookies around Christmas because I love Christmas cookies. So, being sure I find a gluten-free way to enjoy some of my favorite holiday foods allows me to not feel bummed out when I can't eat everything on the Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner table that I historically have loved and enjoyed. All right, there you have it. That's how I approach having a dietary restriction around the holiday. Cheers to a wonderful holiday season. I hope you'll come back next week where I'll be talking about some of my favorite sleep and baby related products in 2022. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.